The chill of October 1902 bit sharper than usual into the bones of Blackwood, Maine, a quiet, unassuming town nestled between jagged coastline and whispering pine forests. Blackwood had always found its rhythm dictated by the tides and the ore veins beneath its soil. But on that particular morning, the rhythm had shattered, replaced by echoing silence that spoke of an unnatural void. 17 men had descended into the maw of the Blackwood mine the previous evening, their lamps casting dancing shadows against the damp rock, their laughter, coarse and familiar, echoing down the main shaft. Now, only the wind, carrying the scent of salt and pine, whispered through the mine's yawning entrance. No lamps flickered from the depths, no picks bit into stone, no human sound emerged. It was a silence so profound, so absolute, that it felt less like an absence and more like a presence, a suffocating blanket, woven from dread and unanswered questions. Can you feel it, this oppressive quiet that descends when the heartbeat of a community suddenly falters? Imagine the wives, their hands frozen, mid-door, staring out at the mine entrance, their breath catching in their throats. Imagine the children, their playful shouts dying on their lips, sensing the invisible web of fear tightening around them. This isn't just a story of missing men. It's a testament to the chilling ripple effect of an inexplicable void, a void that swallowed not just bodies, but answers, hope, and the very fabric of a small town's trust. Join me as we unearth the forgotten whispers of Blackwood, a place where the earth itself seemed to conspire to bury a truth too terrible to bear. For those of you who appreciate the unraveling of historical enigmas, consider joining our channel's community. There are many more buried secrets waiting to be exhumed. The first hint of trouble wasn't a cry for help or a cabin's rumble. It was the absence of the morning shift. Thomas Tam O'Malley, the grizzled foreman with a beard like a winter thicket and eyes that had seen too much coal dust, was usually the first man up the incline, kicking stones and spitting tobacco juice. By dawn, his empty cottage, the unlit stove, the half-eaten breakfast on the table, these were the first unsettling tremors. By 7 o'clock, with the sun just beginning to burn off the coastal mist, a nervous knot had formed at the mine entrance. By 8, it was a full-blown panic. A makeshift search party, armed with lanterns and a desperate hope, ventured into the Blackwood mine. The air within was thick with the scent of damp earth and stale rock, but it lacked the familiar tang of cordite or the acrid sting of lamp oil that spoke of recent work. The main shaft, usually a bustling artery of activity, was eerily still. Their voices, calling out names, Tam, Silas, Finn, were swallowed by the echoing darkness, returning only their own frantic reverberations. They checked the lift cage. It sat at the bottom, empty. They followed the main tunnel, their boots crunching on loose shale, their lamps cutting feeble arcs in the oppressive gloom. The initial expectation was a cave-in, a sudden collapse trapping the men, but there was no sign of fresh rockfall, no splintered timbers, no choked passages. The mine seemed intact, yet utterly devoid of human presence. It was as if the 17 men had simply vanished. It's like they picked up and walked out the back door, muttered Jebediah Crow, a local farmer who had joined the search, his face pale in the lantern light. His voice, usually booming across his fields, was a nervous whisper. But there ain't no back door to a mine. The mine itself, owned by the newly formed Blackwood Mining Company, was a relatively new venture, less than 5 years old. It had promised prosperity to a town that had seen its fishing industries decline. The veins of ore were rich, or so the company's prospectus claimed, and the work, though dangerous, was plentiful. Yet, even before this incident, whispers had circulated through Blackwood's taverns and general store. Whispers of unusual finds, of strange rock formations, of an almost obsessive drive by the company's enigmatic lead geologist, Dr. Alistair Finch, to go deeper. Dr. Finch, a man of sharp angles and even sharper intellect, had arrived in Blackwood with a formidable reputation and an air of detached superiority. He was less interested in the practicalities of ore extraction and more in the geological anomalies he believed lay beneath the town. He spent more time in the mine's deepest exploratory shafts, often alone, than any other company man. His office, a cramped room overflowing with maps, geological samples, and esoteric texts, was a sanctuary he rarely allowed others to penetrate. Locals found him unsettling, his eyes too bright, his focus too intense. He spoke in scientific jargon that soared over their heads, often mentioning unprecedented strata and unique mineral compositions. These whispers, dismissed as local gossip and the usual grumbling about management, now took on a sinister resonance. Had Dr. Finch's obsession, his relentless push to dig deeper, led to something more than just mineral wealth? Had the 17 miners stumbled upon something that should have remained undisturbed? The search continued for days, expanding beyond the mine itself. The dense forests around Blackwood were scoured, the rocky coastline inspected for any sign of a struggle or a forced exit. Local law enforcement, a single sheriff named Bartholomew Bart Grimsley, was overwhelmed. Bart, a man more accustomed to mediating neighborly disputes than investigating mass disappearances, found himself adrift in a sea of frantic questions and baseless theories. He dispatched telegrams to Portland and even Boston, appealing for aid, but the responses were slow, bureaucratic, and ultimately offered little practical help. The disappearance of 17 working-class men from a remote Maine town, while tragic, was not considered a national emergency. As the days bled into a week, hope began to curdle into despair. The frantic energy of the initial search faded, replaced by a grim resignation. Of the missing men huddled together, their grief a shared, silent burden. The mine, once a symbol of Blackwood's aspirations, now stood as a gaping maw of unanswered questions, a monument to a terrifying enigma. One particular anomaly stood out in Sheriff Grimsley's rudimentary investigation. A young miner, barely out of his teens, named Caleb Thorne, had been scheduled for the same shift as the missing 17. He had inexplicably called in sick that evening, suffering from what his mother described as a sudden, crippling headache and a profound sense of dread. Caleb, a boy not given 2 flights of fancy, swore he had a premonition, a chilling vision of the mine swallowing them whole. He now lay in bed, pale and trembling, haunted by the survival he couldn't explain. "It wasn't no cave-in, Sheriff," Caleb whispered, his eyes wide and unfocused as Bart interviewed him. "It was quieter, like the air just got sucked out of it, and they went with it. And the rocks, they didn't look right. Not like regular rocks." Bart dismissed it as the ramblings of a feverish boy, but a seed of unease was planted. Not like regular rocks. What could that mean? The deeper he looked, the more the conventional explanations for the disappearance crumbled. No bodies, no debris, no signs of struggle beyond the vague sense of an abrupt, unearthly cessation of life. The only physical evidence they found was a single, peculiar rock sample near the mine's deepest exploratory shaft, a sample Dr. Finch had been reportedly obsessed with. It wasn't granite or shale, the usual geology of Blackwood. It was smooth, almost obsidian-like, yet glimmered with an unnatural faint luminescence, unlike anything Bart had ever seen. He picked it up, feeling an odd coldness emanating from its surface, a subtle vibration that seemed to hum against his palm. He tucked it into his pocket, a small, unsettling secret. What secrets did this strange stone hold? And what did it truly mean to dig too deep? The answers, he knew, lay buried even deeper than the missing men. The strange rock in Sheriff Grimsley's pocket felt like a lead weight, yet it hummed with an almost imperceptible energy. He pulled it out, turning it over in his calloused hand. Under the flickering gaslight of his office, its faint luminescence seemed to pulse, a muted heartbeat in the silent room. It wasn't just its appearance. There was an unsettling coldness to it, as if it had absorbed all warmth from the deep earth. Caleb Thorne's words echoed in his mind, not like regular rocks. And indeed, this was anything but regular. Have you ever held something that felt wrong? Something that defied explanation, yet whispered of profound truths hidden beneath the surface of the mundane. This isn't just about a rock. It's about the uncomfortable sensation that the world you thought you knew is far stranger, far more dangerous than you ever imagined. It's about the chilling realization that some secrets are buried, not just by earth, but by deliberate design. We're delving deeper into the unsettling heart of Blackwood, Maine, where the truth might be more alien than any man-made horror. For those seeking to join us on this journey into the unknown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Your engagement helps us bring these forgotten stories to light. Bart Grimsley knew, with a certainty that gnawed at his gut, that this rock was connected to the disappearance of the 17 miners. Dr. Finch, the eccentric geologist, had spent an inordinate amount of time in the lowest exploratory shafts, the very area where this obsidian-like sample was found. It was an area the regular miners often avoided, complaining of an oppressive atmosphere, a feeling of unease that settled upon them the deeper they went. Some even spoke of strange, high-pitched frequencies that would sometimes emanate from the rock face, sounds that seemed to drill into their very bones. Bart decided to pay Dr. Finch a visit. The geologist's office, located in a small, isolated cabin on the outskirts of Blackwood, was a chaotic shrine to his singular obsession. Bookshelves groaned under the weight of geological tomes, ancient maps, and journals filled with intricate diagrams. The air was thick with the scent of dust, ink, and something else, a faint, metallic temps that Bart couldn't quite place. Finch himself, hunched over a microscope, barely acknowledged Bart's presence, his thin fingers meticulously adjusting a lens. "Doctor," Bart began, holding up the strange rock, "I found this near the bottom of shaft 3. Do you recognize it?" Finch's head snapped up, his spectacles glinting in the lamplight. His eyes, usually cool and analytical, widened almost imperceptibly. A flicker of something surprise, alarm, crossed his face before he quickly masked it. "Ah, Sheriff Grimsley, a fascinating specimen, wouldn't you agree?" Finch's voice was reedy, almost as passionate, yet Bart detected an underlying tension. "It's a unique form of volcanic glass, highly unusual for this region. I've been studying it extensively." "Unusual for this region," Bart repeated, gaze unwavering. "Unusual enough to be the sole focus of a man who's supposed to be finding iron ore." Finch finally pushed back from his desk, rising to his full, gangly height. He gestured towards a large, detailed map of the Blackwood mine, pinned to the wall. Red lines, meticulously drawn, converged on the deepest sections of shaft 3, the same area where the rock was found. "Sheriff, the economic viability of this mine hinges on more than just iron. There are trace elements within this stratum that could revolutionize countless industries. The Blackwood Mining Company invested heavily based on my preliminary findings regarding these unique geological formations. We were on the cusp of a truly monumental discovery, monumental enough to cost 17 men their lives." Bart challenged, his voice hardening. "What exactly were you trying to find down there, Dr. Finch? And what did the miners stumble upon?" Finch walked over to a table covered with various rock samples, picking one up. "The miners were simply extracting samples, following my instructions to penetrate deeper into the obsidian vein, as I have come to call it. I believe a structural collapse, perhaps an unforeseen pocket of gas." "There was no collapse, Doctor," Bart interrupted, his gaze fixed on Finch's evasive eyes. "No gas, no signs of a struggle. They vanished." One of the miners, young Caleb Thorne, spoke of the air being sucked out, and the rocks not looking right. He mentioned strange sounds, A vein pulsed in Finch's temple. Fanciful nonsense, Sheriff. The ravings of a boy suffering from a fever. Miners are superstitious by nature. And this rock, Doctor, is it fanciful nonsense? Bart pressed, tapping the obsidian sample. It feels unnatural. Finch hesitated, then sighed, a sound that seemed more performative than genuine. Look, Sheriff, I'm a man of science. I deal in facts, in observable phenomena. This rock, it possesses certain unusual electromagnetic properties. Nothing supernatural, I assure you, merely a unique geological composition. He then offered, a strained smile. Perhaps the intense magnetic field disoriented them, caused them to wander into an uncharted section of the mine. A tragic accident, nothing more. Bart wasn't convinced. Finch's explanation felt too neat, too rehearsed. The geologist's eyes darted around the room as he spoke, landing briefly on a securely locked wooden chest tucked beneath his desk. It was an involuntary glance, but Bart caught it. What did that chest contain? Was it more of these unusual samples, or something far more damning? The Blackwood Mining Company, for its part, was quick to issue official statements. They blamed the incident on unforeseen geological instability and expressed deepest regret. They offered meager compensation to the families, a pittance that felt like an insult rather than solace. Lawyers from Portland arrived, sleek and predatory, to ensure no lawsuits would stick. The company's primary concern seemed to be containing the narrative, stifling any speculation that might tarnish their reputation or invite further scrutiny into their operations. This corporate response, so immediate and so dismissive of the human cost, only fueled Bart's suspicion. He remembered a fleeting conversation with Thomas O'Malley, the missing foreman, just a week before the incident. Tam had been agitated, grumbling about Finch's insistence on blasting through a cursed seam and how it felt like digging into a live thing. He'd dismissed it then, as Tam's usual colorful language, but now it resonated with chilling accuracy. Bart left Finch's office feeling no closer to the truth, only more convinced that a deliberate deception was underway. The geologist was hiding something, protecting a secret far more profound than a simple mining accident. The obsidian rock in his pocket continued its faint hum, a silent, vibrating testament to the untold story beneath Blackwood. That night, alone in his office, Bart found himself drawn back to the strange rock. He placed it on his desk, pulling out an old magnifying glass. He noticed minute, almost imperceptible etchings on its surface, too faint to be natural geological patterns. They looked like tiny, interwoven symbols, alien in their geometry. Were they naturally occurring, or something else entirely? His mind reeled. He considered bringing the rock to a geology expert, but a gut feeling, an instinct honed by years of living in a small, insular community, told him that discretion was paramount. He trusted no one outside Blackwood, not yet. He decided to visit Caleb Thorne again, not for answers about the mine, but about his premonition. Perhaps the boy, unburdened by scientific dogma or corporate agendas, had seen something in his fevered state that held a key. As he walked through the quiet streets of Blackwood, the glow of the distant mine entrance, usually a familiar comfort, now seemed like a predatory eye, watching, waiting. The cold hum of the obsidian in his pocket intensified, an ominous thrum against his hip. What chilling truth did those strange etchings on its surface conceal? And what did it truly mean for the Blackwood Mining Company to be so eager to bury it? The night air held its breath, waiting for the secrets of the obsidian vein to truly reveal themselves. The late autumn air of Blackwood, Maine, clung to Sheriff Grimsley as he made his way to the Thorne cottage. The hum of the obsidian rock in his pocket was a persistent, low-frequency thrum against his hip, a constant reminder of the alien presence he now suspected lay beneath the town. The lamplit windows of the homes he passed seemed to offer little comfort against the encroaching darkness. a darkness that felt less like night and more like a shroud descending upon the community. Have you ever had a feeling, a nagging intuition, that defies logic, yet screams a profound truth? This isn't just about the rational pursuit of evidence. It's about listening to the unsettling whispers of the subconscious, the premonitions that often precede cataclysm. In this part of our story, we're going to explore the fragile line between intuition and illusion, as we seek answers from a young mind scarred by what it may have witnessed, or perhaps what it felt. If you're captivated by the psychological undercurrents of true crime and historical mystery, you're in the right place. Don't forget to engage with us in the comments. Your theories are always welcome in our growing community. Caleb Thorne's mother, a gaunt woman named Alara, opened the door, her eyes swollen from days of quiet weeping. She invited Bart in, her movements slow and weary. The small cottage was impeccably clean, despite the pall of grief that hung in the air. Caleb lay in his bed, a thin blanket pulled up to his chin, his face unnaturally pale in the dim light. He looked smaller, more fragile than Bart remembered. He's been having nightmares. Sheriff Ilara whispered, her voice cracking. Wakes up screaming about sounds and shadows. Says the mind swallowed them whole, not just cave-in, says it was hungry. Bart sat by Caleb's bedside, the boy's eyes, usually bright and full of youthful mischief, now wide and unfocused, staring at something only he could see. Caleb, Bart said gently, his voice low and calm. Do you remember what you told me about the rocks? About them not looking right? Caleb nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on an unseen point beyond Bart's shoulder. They were dark, like midnight, but they shone, and they moved. Sheriff, not like falling rocks, more like breathing. Bart felt a chill crawl up his spine. Breathing. What do you mean, breathing? Like they had a pulse, Caleb continued, his voice barely a whisper, as if sharing a terrible secret. And the symbols on the dark rocks, they glowed. Sometimes, when the sound started. What sound, Caleb? Bart leaned closer, his heart hammering against his ribs. The obsidian in his pocket felt suddenly colder. A hum, deep and low. Caleb recounted, his fingers twitching on the blanket. Then it got higher, like a scream, but not a human scream. It went right through you. And then, the air got thin, like it was all being pulled away. And then, nothing. Caleb's eyes suddenly snapped to Bart's face, wide with an unearthly terror. They weren't crushed, Sheriff. They were taken by the deep dark. It opened for them. Alara Thorne gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. Bart felt a prickle of sweat on his brow. The boy's description was vivid, horrifying, and inexplicably consistent with the uncanny silence and lack of debris in the mine, and the symbols. Those faint etchings he'd seen on the obsidian rock. Did you see anyone else, Caleb? Bart asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Anyone unusual down in the mine? Caleb shook his head, then paused. Dr. Finch. He was always down there, always looking at the dark rocks. He had a special lantern, brighter than ours. Bart thanked Alara and left the cottage. The image of Caleb's terrified eyes burned into his memory. The boy's story, while seemingly fantastical, fit the impossible facts of the disappearance far better than any geological instability or pockets of gas. The breathing rocks, the hum, the air being pulled away, it sounded less like a natural disaster, and more like a ritual, a consumption. Back in his office, Bart pulled out the obsidian rock again. He placed it under a stronger lamp, examining the faint etchings. They weren't random marks. They were intricate, angular, almost geometric, unlike any language or symbol he'd ever seen. They reminded him vaguely of the cryptic diagrams he'd glimpsed in some of Dr. Finch's books. Was this a coincidence? Or was Finch using some ancient, forgotten knowledge to manipulate whatever lay deep within the mine? He remembered the locked chest in Finch's office, the one the geologist had glanced at so protectively. Bart's instincts, usually a reliable compass in the labyrinth of human deceit, screamed that the chest held more answers. He considered a warrant, but on what grounds? A boy's fever dream and a strange rock. He needed more. Something concrete. The memory of Thomas O'Malley's agitated comments resurfaced, blasting through a cursed seam, digging into a live thing. Tam, a man grounded in the practicalities of mining, was not prone to flights of fancy. He'd seen something, or felt something, that had disturbed him deeply. Was it the same breathing sensation Caleb described? Bart felt a surge of grim determination. He knew he was walking a dangerous path. The Blackwood Mining Company, with its powerful lawyers and its dismissive statements, clearly wanted this matter buried, literally and figuratively. Dr. Finch, with his detached demeanor and his obsession with unique geological formations, was a vital, terrifying piece of the puzzle. He decided his next move needed to be bolder, less official. He couldn't go in as sheriff. He needed to go in as a man seeking the truth, willing to bend the rules if necessary. He would need a cover story, a way to get back into Finch's office, unnoticed. The opportunity came sooner than he expected. The mining company announced a formal memorial service for the lost miners. A cynical PR stunt designed to show compassion while simultaneously reinforcing the official narrative of an accident. Dr. Finch, predictably, was scheduled to deliver a brief, detached eulogy on the geological challenges of the Blackwood region. This would be Bart's chance. While the town gathered at the small community hall, steeped in forced grief and hollow platitudes, Bart would make his move. He'd slip away, making sure he wasn't seen. He'd return to Finch's cabin, now likely empty, and find out what was in that chest. The thought was risky, bordering on illegal. But the hum of the obsidian in his pocket and the echo of Caleb's terrified whispers left him no choice. He had to know what kind of geological anomaly could take 17 men without a trace. And what if Finch wasn't just studying it, but using it? The implications sent a cold shiver down his spine. As the day of the memorial dawned, a heavy fog rolled in from the coast, shrouding Blackwood in a thick, silent embrace, as if the very town was holding its breath, anticipating the unveiling of a truth best left buried. What horrors would Bart uncover in the sealed chest of the enigmatic Dr. Finch? And how deeply was the Blackwood Mining Company truly complicit in this unfolding nightmare? The answers lay behind a locked door and in the heart of a darkness that had truly dug too deep. The day of the memorial dawned, appropriately, under a suffocating shroud of coastal fog. It clung to the trees, swallowed the distant cries of gulls, and muted the hesitant footsteps of Blackwood's grieving citizens as they made their way to the community hall. For Sheriff Bart Grimsley, the oppressive atmosphere was a welcome accomplice, a veil behind which he could carry out his clandestine mission. The hum of the obsidian rock in his pocket was now a constant, low thrum, a subtle vibration against his thigh, almost an insistent whisper urging him forward. Have you ever felt the weight of a decision? A choice that could unravel everything? You thought you knew, or condemn you to ignorance. This isn't just about breaking a lock. It's about crossing a moral threshold, driven by an unyielding hunger for truth in the face of overwhelming power and deliberate obfuscation. We're about to witness a quiet act of defiance that will plunge us deeper into the unsettling core of Blackwood's hidden evil. If you're a connoisseur of dark revelations and the relentless pursuit of concealed histories, you're in the right place. Don't forget to show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel. Your engagement fuels our journey into these shadowy corners of the past. Bart Grimsley, feigning a sudden illness, excused himself from the somber gathering at the community hall. His absence would likely go unnoticed amidst the hushed condolences and the grim speeches. He moved with a calculated stealth, his familiar gait altered by a newfound urgency. The fog curled around his ankles, muffling his footsteps as he made his way to Dr. Finch's isolated cabin on the edge of town. The cabin was, as expected, deserted. Finch, true to his detached nature, would be enduring the memorial as a necessary, if tiresome, obligation. Bart approached the back door, less visible from the winding, seldom used track that led to the cabin. The lock was old, a simple brass mechanism, but sturdy. Bart, a man of law, felt a pang of unease. But the memory of Caleb's terrified whispers and the cold, vibrating obsidian in his pocket quelled his reservations. Justice, he reasoned, sometimes demanded a temporary detour from strict legality. He produced a small set of lockpicking tools he'd inherited from his late father, a man who, in his youth, had a mischievous knack for liberating forgotten keys from stubborn doors. With practiced hands, Bart worked the tumblers. A soft click echoed in the oppressive silence of the fog. The door swung inward with a faint creak, revealing the cabin's interior, still and heavy with the scent of dust, old paper, and that faint, metallic temps Bart couldn't quite place. He moved quickly, his eyes scanning the room. His gaze went immediately to the space beneath Finch's desk. The wooden chest, dark and unassuming, sat precisely where he remembered it. It was bound with iron straps and secured with a robust padlock. This would be trickier. Bart pulled out a pry bar he'd tucked into his coat. With a grunt, he wedged it beneath the lid, applying pressure. The wood groaned, the iron straps protesting with a high-pitched screech. He strained, sweat beading on his forehead. The sound of the metal tearing through the quiet cabin surprisingly loud in his ears. Finally, with a sharp crack, the padlock snapped, and the lid sprang open. Inside, nestled amongst layers of velvet cloth, lay not gold, nor jewels, but objects far more unsettling. There were several more obsidian rocks, identical to the one in Bart's pocket, each one emanating that faint, unnatural luminescence. But these samples were larger, some as big as Bart's fist. He picked one up. The strange, cold hum intensified, a vibrating current running up his arm. Alongside the rocks were several leather-bound journals, their covers worn, and their pages filled with Finch's precise, spidery handwriting. Bart quickly flipped through. 1. It was not geological notes as he expected. Instead, it was a meticulous log of experiments, of readings and observations that made little sense to him. Numbers, symbols, some resembling the etchings on the obsidian, and strange diagrams, filled the pages. Dates and times were recorded, alongside cryptic entries like oscillation frequency increased, subject exhibiting heightened agitation, or resonance amplification achieved, localized atmospheric distortion observed. But then, Bart's eyes landed on something that made his breath catch in his throat. Tucked beneath the journals, almost hidden, was a folder labeled simply, Blackwood Anomaly Protocol V. Inside the folder were documents, official-looking, yet without any recognizable government or corporate insignia. They bore the same strange, geometric symbols Bart had seen on the rocks, subtly integrated into the borders and watermarks. The text, typed on heavy parchment, detailed a project codenamed Deep Earth Resonance. It spoke of extracting and harnessing primordial energies found in unique subterranean strata. It described biometric responses and atmospheric displacement effects associated with the resonant frequency of the anomaly. Bart's eyes scanned feverishly, his mind struggling to comprehend the scientific jargon, but the grim implications were unmistakable. This wasn't about mining for, this was a clandestine operation, a scientific experiment of unimaginable scale and ethical depravity. Then he saw it, a section titled Test Subjects, Phase 3. Below, it was a chilling list of names, 17 names, the names of the missing miners. Underneath each name were dates, times, and brief clinical observations. Thomas O'Malley Foreman. Exposure 1. Initial robust resistance. Elevated vitals. Subject reported seeing shifting patterns in the air. Silas Blackwood, Exposure 1, mild disorientation. And shifts. Reported vibrations within the skull. Finn McDougal, Exposure 1. Subject exhibited acute distress, reported feeling pulled apart. And then, for all 17 names, a final, horrifying entry, identical for each. Exposure 2, resonance field achieved. Complete atmospheric displacement. Subject disappeared from observation. Residual energy. Signature detected. Bart felt a wave of nausea. Atmospheric displacement. Disappeared from observation. Caleb's words came rushing back. The air got thin, like it was all being pulled away, and they were taken. This wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate, horrifying experiment. The Blackwood Mining Company was a front. Dr. Finch wasn't a geologist. He was a scientist, or perhaps a pawn, in a terrifying scheme to harness some unknown, primordial energy from deep within the earth, using the miners as unwitting test subjects. The cursed seam Tim O'Malley spoke of wasn't just a geological feature. It was a conduit, a doorway to something unfathomable, and Finch was deliberately opening it. But what was this energy? And where had the miners gone? Disappeared from observation. Did that mean they were vaporized, transported, and for what purpose? The faint metallic temps in the air of Finch's cabin suddenly seemed more pronounced, mingling with the dust and old paper. It smelled faintly of ozone and something else, something cold and sterile, like a laboratory. Bart's eyes fell upon a final large diagram at the very bottom of the folder. It depicted a complex machinery, labeled resonance accumulator, with thick lines leading down into a depiction of the Earth, converging on a pulsating core, and emanating from that core were concentric rings, labeled displacement field. This wasn't just unethical, it was monstrous. Finch and whoever was behind him had deliberately sacrificed 17 men. Not for profit, but for some terrifying scientific pursuit. The Blackwood Mining Company wasn't just covering up a tragedy. They were complicit in a mass disappearance driven by an ambition beyond human comprehension. A distant church bell tolled, reminding Bart of the time, of the memorial service winding down. He had to replace everything, leave no trace. But the images of the names, the clinical observations, the horrifying exposure to entry, were seared into his mind. He looked at the obsidian rock in his hand. It was no longer just a strange stone. It was a fragment of a weapon, a key to a terrible unseen dimension. The true horror wasn't just that the miners were gone, but how they were gone, and the chilling implications of what Finch had unleashed. What was resonance, and what unholy power did it hold? The answers, Bart knew, lay not just in the journals, but in confronting the true architects of this dark design, an enemy far more insidious than he had ever imagined. The metallic tang in Dr. Finch's cabin seemed to intensify, sharp as a needle pricking Bart Grimsley's senses, a phantom taste of the horror he had just unearthed. His hands trembled as he carefully, meticulously, placed the documents back into the Blackwood Anomaly Protocol V folder, tucking it beneath the journals. Each obsidian rock was returned to its velvet nest in the chest. He closed the lid, locked it with a new padlock he'd brought, a small but necessary deception, and carefully slid it back beneath the desk. The cabin, once a place of unsettling scientific clutter, now felt like a mausoleum for monstrous secrets. Have you ever discovered a truth so profoundly disturbing that it shifts the very foundation of your reality? This isn't just about a cover-up. It's about the chilling realization that humanity's dark ambition can manifest in forms far more terrifying than simple greed or power. We're now venturing into the heart of an institutional evil, where scientific hubris and human lives are casually sacrificed for an unknown, unfathomable gain. Join us as we navigate this treacherous terrain, where every step closer to the truth feels like a step further into madness. Your continued support, through likes and shares, helps us illuminate these truly dark histories. Bart slipped out of the cabin as silently as he had entered, the faint click of the relocked door swallowed by the lingering fog. The air outside felt colder, the silence deeper, now that he knew its true nature. The hum of the obsidian in his own pocket, a constant companion throughout this grim discovery, felt less like a whisper and more like a low, resonant thrum of triumph from the very earth itself. He walked back to his office in a daze, the clinical terms from the Protocol V folder echoing in his mind: atmospheric displacement, residual energy signature. The missing men weren't lost. They were removed. They were guinea pigs in an experiment that transcended conventional understanding, a horrifying intersection of science and something utterly alien. He pulled out the obsidian rock from his pocket once more. Under the scrutiny of his office lamp, the faint etchings seemed to pulsate, almost to shift. He felt a faint, almost imperceptible vibration emanating from it, a rhythmic thrum that mirrored the beat of his own panicked heart. This wasn't just a rock. It was a fragment of the anomaly, a piece of the terrifying equation that had swallowed the 17 miners. His thoughts immediately turned to the Blackwood Mining Company. They weren't just incompetent, nor merely greedy. They were complicit. The language of the Protocol V documents suggested a highly organized, well-funded operation, one that went far beyond a local mining venture. Who was truly behind Deep Earth Resonance? What was their ultimate goal? Bart knew he couldn't confront Finch directly, not yet. He lacked irrefutable evidence that would stand up in a court of law against powerful corporate lawyers. He needed proof that transcended the stolen documents, proof that would expose the true nature of Protocol V and the entities behind it. His mind went back to Caleb Thorne, the boy's premonition. His description of the breathing rocks and the air being sucked away suddenly made terrifying sense. Caleb hadn't just had a dream. He had experienced a fragment of the displacement field. Perhaps due to his proximity to the mine or some inherent sensitivity, could Caleb, the vulnerable survivor, be a key to understanding what had truly happened, or even to finding the residual energy signature that the documents mentioned? The next morning, Bart rode out to the mine again, this time with a specific purpose. He wasn't looking for bodies or debris. He was looking for anomalies, for anything that might hint at the resonant field described in Finch's documents. The mine entrance still gaped, a silent maw, but now, to Bart, it felt like a portal. He ventured cautiously into the main shaft, his lantern throwing hesitant light into the oppressive gloom. The air felt heavy, charged, even miles from where the incident occurred. He paid closer attention to the rock walls, running his hand over their rough surfaces. He noticed subtle discolorations, faint crystalline streaks that weren't present in other local mines. Was this a manifestation of the unique subterranean strata? As he approached Shaft 3, the deepest exploratory section, he felt the hum of the obsidian in his pocket intensify dramatically. It was no longer a subtle thrum, but a distinct vibration, almost painful against his skin. The air grew colder, and a profound sense of unease settled upon him, far more potent than the initial dread. This was the locus, the place where the anomaly had been engaged. He reached the very end of the deepest tunnel. There, on the rock face, he saw it. Not a cave-in, not a collapse, but a perfectly smooth, circular indentation, almost perfectly round, as if something enormous and invisible had been pressed against the rock, or perhaps pulled away from it. Around the indentation, the obsidian-like rock was more prevalent, shimmering with an unnerving dull glow. And then he heard it, a faint, high-pitched whine, almost subliminal, barely audible, yet it seemed to vibrate within his very bones. It was the sound Caleb had described, the scream, but not a human scream. It was the resonance frequency. Bart felt a primal urge to flee, to turn and run from this terrifying, unnatural place. But his investigative instincts, coupled with a grim determination to find justice for the 17 men, held him rooted. He pulled out the obsidian rock from his pocket and held it up. The high-pitched whine intensified dramatically, almost painfully. The etchings on its surface seemed to glow brighter, pulsating in rhythm with the sound. This wasn't just a tool for extraction. It was a receiver, or perhaps a key. The anomaly was still here, still active, or at least capable of being activated, and Finch, or the powers behind him, knew how to do it. As the whine escalated, the air around Bart seemed to shimmer, the dust motes dancing in strange, erratic patterns. He felt a strange pressure building in his head, a dizzying sensation. He immediately lowered the obsidian rock, stuffing it back into his pocket. The sound subsided, slowly, painfully, back to its faint, almost imperceptible hum. Bart realized, with a sickening certainty, that the deep earth resonance wasn't just about extracting energy. It was about opening a doorway, a portal, to somewhere. And the miners weren't just test subjects. They were the first casualties of a foray into an unknown dimension, or perhaps a terrible, unseen void. The displacement field had literally displaced them, removing them from existence. His mind raced. What was the company's ultimate goal? Was it power? Control? Access to something that lay beyond the veil of their reality? And how could he, a solitary sheriff in a remote Maine town, possibly fight against such an insidious, technologically advanced, and morally bankrupt force? He had to get more information, to understand the full scope of this deep earth resonance, and he knew exactly where to start. The missing pieces of Dr. Finch's research, the full implications of Protocol V. He had to find out who Finch was truly working for. But as he turned to leave the silent, echoing depths of Shaft 3, a sudden, fleeting shadow flickered at the edge of his lantern light, just beyond the mark. It was gone in an instant, too quick to identify, too ephemeral to be real. Was it merely a trick of the light? Or was something else, something from the void, trying to return? The ominous hum of the obsidian in his pocket seemed to answer, a cold, silent confirmation that he was no longer alone in his pursuit of Blackwood's terrible truth. The fleeting shadow in the depths of Shaft 3, gone as quickly as it appeared, left Sheriff Bart Grimsley with a profound sense of unease. His heart hammered, not from exertion, but from a chilling realization. He might not be the only one actively investigating the mine, or worse, something else was present, something that had been displaced and was now attempting to manifest. He hurried out of the shaft, the hum of the obsidian in his pocket, a cold, persistent reminder of the alien presence within the earth. Have you ever felt truly alone in your knowledge, burdened by a truth too enormous and terrifying to share? This isn't just about a lone investigator. It's about the psychological toll of confronting an evil so vast and hidden that it threatens to consume not just a town, but the very sanity of those who seek to expose it. We're now moving beyond the initial horror and into the grim, isolating work of piecing together a conspiracy for those who find themselves drawn to the depths of human depravity and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of it. Remember to engage with our content. Your likes, comments, and shares are invaluable as we bring these buried histories to light. Back in the stale air of his office, the obsidian rock felt like a burning coal in Bart's palm. The faint etchings now seemed almost to writhe, an optical illusion brought on by fatigue and the sheer weight of what he knew. He placed it carefully on his desk, pulling out a large sheet of paper. He needed to organize his thoughts, to create a roadmap through this labyrinth of lies and disappearances. At the center, he wrote, "The 17 miners displaced around it." He scrawled the fragments of evidence. Caleb Thorne's premonition and descriptions: breathing rocks, pulled air, high hum, symbols closing parenthesis, Dr. Finch's obsession with unique subterranean strata and geological anomalies. The Protocol V documents: deep earth resonance, resonance accumulator, atmospheric displacement, test subjects, Residual energy signature. The Blackwood Mining Company's rapid, dismissive cover-up, and corporate lawyers. Thomas O'Malley's chilling comments about digging into a live thing. The physical evidence, the obsidian rocks, the smooth circular indentation in shaft 3, the faint high-pitched whine. The key, he realized, lay in understanding deep earth resonance, and more importantly, the entity or organization behind it. The Protocol V folder had no corporate logo, no identifiable government agency. The symbols on the documents and the rocks were unique. This was no ordinary, publicly traded company. This was something far more secretive, far more powerful. His gaze fell on Dr. Finch's name. Finch was a critical link, either the mastermind or a highly placed operative. Bart needed to know his history, his affiliations, who he reported to. He began sending telegrams, not through official channels, but to trusted contacts in larger cities, old law enforcement acquaintances, a few journalists he'd met during a brief stint in Boston. He requested any information on a Dr. Alistair Finch, particularly his past research, his academic background, and any known associates. He emphasized discretion, knowing that even a hint of his investigation could bring the full, crushing weight of the unknown organization down upon him. The answers trickled back slowly, taking days, sometimes a week, to arrive. What Bart learned about Dr. Alistair Finch was both illuminating and profoundly disturbing. Finch was indeed a brilliant, albeit reclusive, geologist and physicist. He had studied at prestigious European universities before disappearing from academic circles for several years, only to resurface, working for obscure, privately funded research initiatives. There were whispers of unorthodox theories, of a fascination with esoteric sciences, and of a prior, controversial project in the remote mountains of Austria that had ended abruptly with a containment failure and a significant number of missing personnel. The details were vague, shrouded in rumor, but the parallels to Blackwood were chilling. One telegram, sent by a retired journalist in Boston named Elias Vance, contained a crucial piece of information. Vance had remembered a speculative article he'd written years ago about a shadowy consortium of industrialists and scientists. This group, known only as the Ethereum Collective, was rumored to be investing vast fortunes in cutting-edge, often morally ambiguous, research into alternative energy sources and unexplored dimensions. They operated outside conventional government oversight, their members largely anonymous, their resources seemingly limitless. Vance had dismissed it as a conspiracy theory at the time, but the mention of their symbol, a stylized interweaving geometric pattern, made Bart's blood run cold. It was hauntingly similar to the etchings on the obsidian, and subtly integrated into the Protocol V documents. The Ethereum Collective. The name itself was chilling, hinting at something ethereal yet powerful. They were not seeking a quick profit, they were seeking something far grander, far more dangerous. They wanted to harness primordial energies, to manipulate unexplored dimensions, and Blackwood, Maine, with its unique subterranean strata, was merely their latest laboratory, its inhabitants expendable. This explained the swift, corporate cover-up. The Blackwood Mining Company was merely a shell, a convenient front for the Ethereum Collective's true operations. They wielded immense power, enough to suppress any inquiry, to buy silence, and to make 17 men vanish without a trace. Bart felt a renewed surge of anger, burning through the fear. The injustice was staggering. These men, his neighbors, had been offered as sacrifices on the altar of scientific ambition. He had to expose this, no matter the cost. His next step was clear. He needed to find out more about the Ethereum Collective, to identify their members, to understand their motives, and he needed to find out if there were any other Blackwood anomaly sites, any other hidden laboratories where they might be conducting similar, horrifying experiments. He spent long nights poring over the scant information on the Ethereum Collective, cross-referencing names, searching for any connection to Dr. Finch, to the Blackwood Mining Company, or to the mysterious Protocol V. He slept little, haunted by images of the shimmering air in the mine, and Caleb's terrified eyes. The obsidian rock, now kept locked in his desk drawer, continued its low thrum, a constant, irritating reminder of the dark entity lurking beneath Blackwood. One evening, as he sorted through old property deeds, a detail caught his eye. A small, remote island off the coast of Blackwood, known locally as Crow's Tooth, had been quietly purchased by Inshell Corporation, associated with the Blackwood Mining Company, just a few months before the mine opened. It was uninhabited, rocky, and notoriously difficult to access, save for a hidden cove. Why would a mining company need a desolate island, unless it wasn't for mining? Unless it was for something else? A sudden, terrifying thought struck him. The residual energy signature mentioned in Protocol V. What if the displaced miners weren't simply gone? What if they were somewhere else, potentially still within reach, or perhaps still connected to the anomaly? And what if Crow's Tooth Island was not just a remote staging ground, but a site for further experimentation, or even an attempt at retrieving what had been displaced? The thought chilled him to the bone. The hum from the locked drawer seemed to intensify, confirming his grim premonition. Was Crow's Tooth the next step in the collective's horrifying agenda, a place where the echoes of the void might still linger? His investigation had just taken a terrifying turn, leading him from the depths of the earth to the isolated, fog-shrouded shores of the Atlantic. The revelation of Crow's Tooth Island sent a jolt of grim understanding through Sheriff Bart Grimsley. The remote island, shrouded in local folklore about shipwrecks and ill omens, suddenly transformed from a geographical curiosity into a chilling piece of the Ethereum Collective's grand, horrifying design. The obsidian rock, now a constant source of low-level dread in his locked desk drawer, seemed to vibrate with a renewed, insistent energy, as if confirming the sinister purpose of the desolate landmass. Have you ever stumbled upon a detail so seemingly insignificant, yet so profoundly vital, that it completely redefines your understanding of a complex conspiracy? This isn't just about connecting the dots. It's about following a trail of breadcrumbs into a darkness far grander and more terrifying than initially conceived. We are now shifting our focus from the immediate tragedy to the broader, more insidious operations of a truly formidable and morally bankrupt organization. If the intricate weaving of historical facts with chilling fictional possibilities captivates you, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to engage with us. Your insights and theories enrich this communal journey into the unknown. Bart spent the next few days in a meticulous, almost obsessive study of Crow's Tooth Island. Old nautical charts revealed treacherous currents and submerged rocks, making direct approach by sea difficult for anything larger than a small fishing boat. Local legends spoke of a hidden cove, only accessible at high tide, a smuggler's haven, in times long past. This would be the Ethereum Collective's entry point, he surmised, a place where their clandestine equipment and personnel could be brought ashore. UNOBSERVED. The notion that the displaced miners might not be gone forever, but merely somewhere else, gnawed at him. The residual energy signature from Protocol V. Did it mean the men were still alive, trapped in some unimaginable void, their consciousness lingering at the edge of reality? Or was it a mere echo, a scientific remnant of their abrupt removal? The thought fueled his desperate urgency. He had to reach Crow's Tooth. Getting to the island without drawing attention was the primary challenge. Bart couldn't use official channels. His investigation was already a perilous tightrope walk. He approached Silas Thorne, Caleb's uncle, and a seasoned fisherman known for his quiet integrity and intimate knowledge of the treacherous Maine coast. Silas, though grief-stricken by his brother's disappearance, was initially wary. Bart, however, didn't hold back. He revealed the damning contents of the Protocol V folder, the true nature of Finch's experiments, and the involvement of the Ethereum Collective. Silas listened, his weather-beaten face growing pale as Bart spoke, the flickering gaslight in the sheriff's office casting long, dancing shadows. When Bart finished, a profound silence filled the room, broken only by the crackle of the wood stove. "My brother," Silas finally whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "They used him, used them all." His eyes, usually crinkled with good humor, were now hard as flint. "Crow's Tooth, you say? I always heard strange tales about that place, but never paid them mind." "They're not tales anymore, Silas," Bart said, his voice grim. "They're clues. I believe they're trying to perfect their displacement field out there, perhaps even trying to bring back something, or someone, from wherever they sent the miners." Silas agreed to take Bart to the island, under the cover of darkness. He knew the hidden cove, a treacherous passage even for experienced mariners. They would leave at midnight, timing their departure with the high tide, and praying the fog held. The journey was harrowing. Silas's small fishing boat, the Silent Maid, cut through the inky blackness, tossed by the swells. The fog was thick, a blindfold on the world, reducing visibility to mere feet. The rhythmic thrum of the engine was the only sound, competing with the constant, unsettling hum Bart felt from the obsidian in his pocket, which seemed to grow louder with every nautical mile they covered towards the island. It was as if the island itself was calling to the stone, or the stone to the island, as they neared Crow's Tooth. The high-pitched whine that Bart had heard in the mine, subtle at first, began to intensify. It was barely audible above the roar of the waves in the engine, but it was there, a low, unnerving frequency that seemed to vibrate in the very bones of the boat. Silas, though he hadn't been in the mine, felt it too. He frowned, his eyes narrowed, scanning the impenetrable fog ahead. "Sounds like a damned banshee," Silas muttered, his hand tightening on the tiller. They found the hidden cove, a narrow slit in the rocky coastline, almost invisible until they were upon it. Silas expertly navigated the Silent Maid into the calm waters within. The whine grew stronger here, emanating from somewhere deeper on the island. Bart could now clearly distinguish the rhythmic pulse he'd felt in the mine, almost like a massive, unseen heart beating within the earth. They disembarked onto a small, pebble-strewn beach. The air on the island felt strangely charged, almost electric. The sparse vegetation, stunted pines and hardy coastal shrubs, seemed to absorb the light, making the gloom even deeper. Bart pulled out his lantern, its beam cutting feeble arcs into the oppressive darkness. They followed a barely discernible path, winding through the gnarled trees, higher up the rocky incline. The whine continued to escalate, a metallic shriek that grated on their nerves. Then, through a thinning patch of fog, Bart saw it, a structure unlike anything that should be on this remote island. It was a low, metallic building, stark and angular, with no windows. It seemed to pulse with a faint, internal light, visible through the seams of its construction. Towering beside it, reaching into the fog, was a skeletal framework of metal, culminating in a large, dish-like apparatus, pointed skyward. It was unmistakably the resonance accumulator from Finch's diagrams, only now it was a terrifying, tangible reality. This was a laboratory, a power generator, and perhaps a beacon. As they drew closer, the whine became unbearable, a drilling sound that pierced their ears and seemed to vibrate within their very skulls. Bart reached for the obsidian in his pocket. It was throbbing with intense energy, hot to the touch. He pulled it out. It pulsed with a brighter, more aggressive luminescence, the strange symbols on its surface glowing with an internal fire. Suddenly, a voice, amplified and distorted, boomed from the metallic building, cutting through the high-pitched shriek of the accumulator. "Intruder detected. Initiate containment protocol." A searchlight, blindingly bright, swept across the landscape, momentarily catching Bart and Silas in its harsh beam. From the shadows of the building, two figures emerged, clad in dark, unidentifiable uniforms, carrying what looked like modern, bolt-action rifles, weapons far more advanced than anything Bart had seen in Blackwood. Bart and Silas instinctively dove for cover behind a cluster of boulders. The whine from the accumulator reached a fever pitch, almost deafening. The air around them began to shimmer, the world momentarily blurring at the edges. Bart felt the familiar, terrifying pressure building in his head, the sensation of the air thinning, pulling away. This was the displacement field, activated. They're activating it. Bart yelled over the din, clutching the glowing obsidian rock. The symbols on its surface were now burning bright. Was it a key, or a target? Were they about to experience the same fate as the miners? The two uniformed figures advanced, their rifles raised. Bart knew they were caught, trapped on this desolate island, exposed to an experimental horror. What new, terrifying dimension awaited them if the Ethereum Collective's monstrous device reached its full unholy potential? And could the glowing obsidian be their only hope, or their ultimate downfall? The shriek intensified, a prelude to an unseen, terrifying transformation. The high-pitched shriek of the resonance accumulator on Crow's Tooth Island intensified to an unbearable pitch, a vibrating wave that threatened to shatter Bart Grimsley's very bones. The air around them shimmered violently, distorting the very fabric of reality, turning the world into a kaleidoscopic blur. The glowing obsidian rock in Bart's hand pulsed with an aggressive, blinding light, its strange symbols burning with an inner fire, almost as if it were resonating directly with the terrifying device before them. Have you ever faced a moment where the line between reality and the unimaginable blurs, where the very laws of physics seem to unravel before your eyes? This isn't just about survival. It's about confronting a profound existential threat, a force that seeks to rewrite the rules of existence. We are about to plunge headfirst into the very heart of the Ethereum Collective's monstrous experiment, where the fate of the missing miners, and perhaps the very nature of reality, hangs in the balance. For those who dare to venture into the deepest, most unsettling corners of historical mystery, your journey continues. Don't forget to join our community. Your insights are valued as we grapple with these unfathomable truths. The two uniformed figures, their faces obscured by the harsh glare of the searchlight, raised their rifles. Bart knew they had seconds. He looked at Silas, whose face was a mask of grim determination. There was no escape, not with the displacement field activating. In a desperate, split-second decision, Bart clutched the obsidian rock even tighter, thrusting it forward towards the shimmering air, towards the infernal machine. A blinding flash erupted from the obsidian, not outward, but inward, drawing the distorting air towards it like a hungry maw. The high-pitched whine from the accumulator faltered, sputtering, and then with a guttural grinding groan, it died. The searchlight flickered and extinguished, plunging the island back into a sudden, absolute darkness. The air, which had been thin and oppressive, rushed back in, filling Bart's lungs with a gasp. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the lapping of waves and their own ragged breaths. The obsidian in Bart's hand, though still faintly luminescent, had cooled significantly, its vibrant glow reduced to a dull throb. The symbols no longer burned, but seemed to recede back into its depths. What in God's name was that? Silas whispered, his voice trembling. I think, Bart began, his own voice hoarse. I think this rock is a key, or a counter. It reacted to their machine. The two uniformed figures were gone, dissolved into the sudden darkness. Or perhaps they had been caught in the backlash of the sputtering displacement field. Bart didn't linger to find out. We need to get inside that building, Bart urged, pulling Silas to his feet, before they regroup, or before they fix whatever that was. They cautiously approached the metallic structure. The low internal light that had pulsed earlier was now completely absent. The door, previously a seamless part of the wall, now stood slightly ajar. Bart pushed it open, revealing a cavernous interior. The air inside was thick with the lingering scent of ozone, burnt circuitry, and that familiar, sterile, metallic temps. Wires hung loose from damaged consoles, sparks flickered sporadically, and an acrid smell of scorched metal hung heavy. The central chamber was dominated by a larger version of the resonance accumulator, a complex array of coils, crystal conduits, and what looked like a massive, swirling vortex of dark energy contained within a transparent cylinder. This vortex, however, was now stagnant, its dark energy dulled, flickering weakly like a dying ember. Rows of monitors lined the walls, most of them dark or displaying static. One, however, still glowed faintly, displaying a complex diagram of interconnected nodes and lines. Bart recognized the symbols of the Ethereum Collective and the familiar layout of the Blackwood mine, but overlaid onto it was a vast, intricate network that seemed to span continents. It was a map of other anomaly sites, other energy sources, other experimental displacement fields. Blackwood was just one node in a terrifying global network. As they moved deeper into the control room, a groaning sound emanated from a far corner. Bart instinctively raised his lantern, revealing Dr. Finch slumped against a console, his face pale and clammy, a thin trickle of blood stemming from his nose. His eyes, though unfocused, were wide with a mixture of terror and a strange, almost ecstatic awe. "Sheriff Grimsley," Finch rasped, his voice barely audible. You stopped it. How?" Bart held up the obsidian rock. What is it, Finch? What have you done?" Finch coughed, a wet, rattling sound. "It's a fragment of the Ethereum, a focal point. The conduits, they need a perfect resonance. You disrupted it." He winced, clutching his head. "The Collective, they want to bridge the gap, to access the other side. A new source of power, unlimited, the other side." Silas interjected, his voice trembling. "Are my brother and the others there? Can they be brought back?" Finch's eyes, still, wide and unfocused, seemed to look through them, into some unseen distance. "They are displaced. Not dead, not truly. They're energy signatures. They exist within the interdimensional fabric. We were trying to stabilize the portal, to retrieve them, to study the new environment. You used them as guinea pigs," Bart snarled, his anger surging. "You sent them into that void. For progress, Sheriff," Finch cried, his voice regaining a desperate edge. "For the advancement of human understanding. The Ethereum, it's a consciousness, a boundless energy source. It holds infinite possibilities. We were close, so close." Bart exchanged a horrified look with Silas. The Ethereum wasn't just an energy source. It was a consciousness. Finch spoke of it as if it were a sentient being. The sheer scale of the hubris was breathtaking. Suddenly, a series of rapid footsteps echoed from outside the building. The uniformed figures were returning, perhaps with reinforcements. Bart knew they couldn't stay. Finch, despite his injuries, needed to be apprehended. He was a living testament to the Collective's atrocities. "We need to go, Silas," Bart urged, grabbing Finch by the arm. The geologist was surprisingly weak, but as Bart tried to pull Finch to his feet, Finch's eyes, fixed on the dormant accumulator, suddenly widened with a horrifying realization. The conduits. The power surge. It ruptured something, Finch mumbled, almost to himself. A breach, an instability. Suddenly, the stagnant vortex with the accumulator cylinder began to stir, a faint dark ripple appearing on its surface. The air in the room grew colder, and a familiar, metallic tang intensified, sharp and chilling. From the depths of the now stirring vortex, a faint high-pitched whisper emerged, not the mechanical whine of the machine, but something far older, far more insidious. It was a collective sigh, a mournful, hungry whisper that seemed to echo with the voices of the lost. Bart stared at the vortex, mesmerized by the burgeoning darkness within. Was it the energy signature of the miners, trapped and yearning for release? Or was it something else entirely, something far more ancient and terrible, now stirring from its slumber, thanks to Finch's reckless ambition? The whispers intensified, coalescing into discernible, yet utterly alien murmurs that seemed to claw at the edges of their sanity. Finch's eyes rolled back in his head, a faint, knowing smile gracing his bloodied lips. What ancient evil had the Ethereum Collective truly unleashed, and would it consume them all before they could escape Crow's Tooth Island? The labyrinth of horror was just beginning to reveal its true, monstrous depths. The whispers emanating from the dormant resonance accumulator grew in volume and intensity. No longer merely alien murmurs, but a cacophony of distorted sounds that clawed at the edges of Bart Grimsley's mind. It wasn't human language, yet it carried an unmistakable sense of immense age, profound sorrow, and an insatiable hunger. Dr. Finch, now completely unresponsive, lay slumped against the console, a faint, almost beatific smile on his bloodied lips, his eyes still fixed on the stirring vortex, as if enthralled to whatever primordial entity was attempting to manifest. Have you ever witnessed something so utterly beyond human comprehension that it challenges your very definition of reality? This isn't just about a scientific experiment gone wrong. It's about the terrifying consequences of hubris, of seeking knowledge and power from realms best left undisturbed. We are now standing at the precipice of an interdimensional breach, where the echoes of the void are growing louder, threatening to spill over into our world. For those brave enough to confront the true horror of cosmic indifference and the darkness it can unleash. Remember to engage with our channel. Your continued support helps us unearth these forbidden histories. We have to go, Sheriff, Silas urged, his voice strained with terror, pulling Bart from his horrified trance. The sound of the approaching footsteps outside was growing louder, closer. The uniformed men were almost at the door. Bart, shaking off the lingering dread, knew Silas was right. He couldn't afford to be caught. Not now. Not with Finch as a captive, a living, breathing piece of evidence. He wrestled the unconscious geologist onto his shoulder, the man's wiry frame surprisingly heavy. The rock, Finch mumbled, suddenly, weakly, his eyes fluttering open for a moment, fixed on the obsidian still clutched in Bart's hand. The stabilizing agent. Don't lose it. His eyes rolled back again, and he slumped once more into unconsciousness. Bart clutched the obsidian tighter. Its faint luminescence pulsed in sync with the disturbing whispers from the accumulator, almost as if it was drawing them, or pushing them back. This way. Silas pointed towards a secondary exit at the rear of the building, a service door that seemed less heavily fortified. They half-carried, half-dragged Finch through the maze of damaged equipment, the whispers intensifying with every beat of the pulsating vortex. Just as they reached the service door, the main entrance burst open with a crash. 3 more uniformed figures, their rifles raised, stormed into the main chamber. Stop. Hands where I can see them. One of them barked, his voice amplified by the cavernous space. Bart threw a quick glance over his shoulder. The figures were already advancing, their headlamps cutting through the gloom. There was no time. He shoved Silas and Finch through the service door, following immediately behind them. Pulling the heavy metal door shut with a clang, they burst out into the swirling fog. The cold night air, a sharp shock after the stale, charged atmosphere of the lab. The high-pitched whine from the accumulator seemed to follow them, even through the thick walls, a persistent, unsettling reminder of the unholy power within. They stumbled down the rocky path towards the hidden cove, the sounds of shouting and the metallic clang of boots on the lab floor echoing behind them. Silas, surprisingly agile for his age, had already started untying the silent maid. Get him in, Sheriff. he yelled over the rising wind. They loaded Finch's unconscious body into the boat, Bart keeping a wary eye on the path. The Ethereum Collective would not let them leave easily. Just as Silas pushed them off the shore, a figure emerged from the fog at the mouth of the cove, a rifle glinting in the dim light. A shot rang out, chipping a piece of rock near the boat. Silas, leaning heavily on the rudder, cursed under his breath. "They'll be on us in a minute." Bart, still clutching the obsidian rock, felt a surge of grim determination. He looked back at the imposing structure of the laboratory, half hidden by the fog, and then at the dark, turbulent waters ahead. They were escaping Crow's Tooth Island, but what then? How could he expose such a powerful, secretive organization as the silent maid sliced through the waves, battling against the treacherous currents? Bart held Finch close. The geologist was stirring, moaning softly. "The Ethereum, it feeds on despair," Finch muttered, his eyes still closed. "The energy signature of the lost, a conduit. It amplifies the breach." Bart's blood ran cold. The residual energy signature of the missing miners wasn't just a scientific anomaly, it was sustenance. The Ethereum Collective hadn't just displaced them. They had potentially created a perpetual energy source from their anguish, a living battery of terror, fueling their terrifying endeavors. The thought was so monstrous, so utterly depraved, that it made the physical dangers of their escape seem trivial. As they cleared the island, and the metallic whine faded into the roar of the ocean, Bart began to formulate a plan. He couldn't go back to Blackwood. He was a small-town sheriff against a global power. He needed to find someone who could truly help, someone with resources, with influence, who believed in the impossible. His mind immediately went to Elias Vance, the retired journalist in Boston who had provided the crucial information about the Ethereum Collective. Vance might have dismissed his own theories as conspiracy, but faced with Finch and the obsidian rock, he would be forced to believe. "Silas," Bart said, his voice firm despite the chilling revelations, "we're not going back to Blackwood. We're going to Boston." Silas nodded, his jaw set. He understood the stakes. His brother and the 16 other miners deserved justice, even if it meant confronting an enemy that operated in the shadows of the world. The journey was long and arduous. They faced rough seas and the constant fear of pursuit. Finch remained largely unconscious, occasionally muttering cryptic phrases about dimensional tears and primordial consciousnesses. The obsidian rock, now tucked safely into a waterproof pouch, continued its faint, steady hum, a silent, unsettling companion throughout their desperate voyage. Days later, battered but alive, they finally reached the bustling docks of Boston. The vast city, with its gaslit streets and towering buildings, felt overwhelming after the quiet isolation of Blackwood. But it also represented hope, a chance to finally expose the Ethereum Collective and their unspeakable crimes. Bart found Elias Vance's address, a small, cluttered apartment above a dusty bookstore. Vance, a grizzled man with a perpetually cynical expression, opened the door, his eyes widening in surprise at the sight of Bart, Silas, and the unconscious Finch. "Sheriff Grimsley," Vance squinted, then his gaze fell upon the still figure of Finch. "What in the blazes have you dragged in?" Bart looked at Vance, then back at the dark, chaotic streets of Boston. The real fight was just beginning. He had Finch, he had the obsidian, and he had a terrifying story of interdimensional experiments, missing men, and a global conspiracy. But the Ethereum Collective was powerful, with tentacles reaching into every corner of society. Would the truth be enough to stop them? Or would their relentless pursuit of forbidden knowledge consume not just the lives of miners, but the very fabric of the world? The price of uncovering this knowledge, Bart knew, was far greater than he had ever imagined. His odyssey into the heart of darkness was far from over. Boston, 1902. The city's cacophony, the clatter of horse-drawn carriages, the distant blare of steamship horns, the clamor of 1,000 lives, was a jarring contrast to the grim silence of Blackwood, Maine. For Sheriff Bart Grimsley, the bustling anonymity of the metropolis offered a fragile shield, a temporary reprieve from the relentless gaze of the Ethereum Collective. As Elias Vance stared at the unconscious form of Dr. Finch, an old journalist's cynicism warred with a dawning horror. Have you ever found yourself at a crossroads, holding a truth so profound and dangerous that its revelation could reshape the world or shatter your own? This isn't just about exposing a crime. It's about a desperate struggle against an unseen, omnipresent power, a battle for the very soul of scientific ethics and human accountability. We have journeyed through the depths of human ambition and cosmic dread, and now we arrive at the poignant, reflective, and cautionary conclusion of our story. What lasting echoes will these buried secrets leave, and what lessons must we carry forward? For those who have walked this dark path with us, your insight and engagement are invaluable. Bart quickly recounted the entire horrifying saga to Elias Vance, from Caleb Thorne's premonition to the terrifying Protocol V documents, from the pulsating obsidian rock to the chilling reality of the resonance accumulator on Crow's Tooth Island. As he spoke, he laid out the evidence, the copies of Finch's logs he'd secreted away, the detailed map of the mine and the island, and finally, the obsidian rock itself, its faint, unsettling hum, a silent testament to the alien power it contained. Vance, a veteran of countless sensational stories, listened with a growing disbelief that slowly morphed into a profound, chilling conviction. His eyes, usually sharp with journalistic skepticism, now reflected a deep-seated fear. He picked up the obsidian rock, feeling its unnatural coldness, its subtle vibration. "My God, Grimsley," Vance whispered, his voice thick with a mixture of awe and terror. "The Ethereum Collective. I thought it was just a phantom, a whisper among the powerful. But this is real." They knew the odds were stacked against them. The Ethereum Collective was deeply entrenched, operating beyond the reach of conventional law and public scrutiny. Their resources were seemingly limitless, their reach far-flung. Exposing them would require more than just a newspaper article. It would require a public outcry, a collective will to dismantle an organization that blurred the lines between scientific progress and monstrous depravity. Over the next few weeks, operating from Vance's cluttered apartment, Bart and Vance worked tirelessly. Vance, leveraging his network of disgruntled former colleagues, disillusioned academics, and whistleblowers, began to meticulously piece together the larger puzzle of the Ethereum Collective. They uncovered more whispers of anomaly sites across the globe, of mysterious disappearances, and of brilliant, but morally compromised scientists lured into the Collective's orbit. Finch, once he recovered somewhat, proved to be a broken man, muttering delirious, self-serving justifications of his scientific progress, balanced by flashes of profound, self-pitying regret for the men he had displaced. His fragmented testimony, though unreliable in court, provided terrifying glimpses into the Collective's philosophy and aims, not just energy, but control over the very fabric of existence, access to unseen dimensions, and an understanding of the primordial consciousness they believed lay at the universe's heart. The obsidian rock, however, proved to be their most potent and dangerous piece of evidence. Under Vance's insistence, Bart agreed to have it examined by a reclusive, independent physicist known to Vance, a Dr. Eris Thorne, no relation to Caleb, who specialized in unconventional theories of electromagnetism and quantum physics. Dr. Thorne, a frail but brilliant man, confirmed the rock's extraordinary properties, its ability to resonate with and disrupt localized energy fields. He theorized that it was a fragment of a larger, incredibly dense and stable exotic matter, capable of generating or manipulating what he termed dimensional rifts. He warned them of its inherent instability, if improperly handled, and the unknown consequences of prolonged exposure. Vance began to write, not just a newspaper article, but a series of interconnected exposés, gradually escalating in their claims, carefully laying out the pattern of disappearances, the corporate shell game, the scientific jargon translated into layman's horror, and, finally, the existence of the Ethereum Collective and their horrific experiments. He started with the disappearance of the Blackwood miners, presenting it not as an accident, but as a calculated act of atmospheric displacement, backed by anonymous testimonies from sources Bart had identified, now willing to risk speaking out in secret and circumstantial evidence he and Bart had painstakingly gathered. The initial articles were met with skepticism, then outrage. The Blackwood Mining Company issued furious denials, threatened lawsuits, and attempted to discredit Vance and Bart as purveyors of sensationalist lies. But the sheer volume of information, the consistency of the pattern across different incidents, and the terrifying scientific jargon slowly began to chip away at public indifference. The tide began to turn when Vance released a heavily edited excerpt of Finch's delirious ramblings, carefully transcribed to emphasize the displacement and primordial consciousness aspects, combined with a stark, unsettling drawing of the resonance accumulator as described by Bart. The sheer, chilling audacity of the claims, coupled with the unexplained disappearance of 17 men, struck a raw nerve. The public outcry was slow to build, but once ignited, it became a raging inferno. Families of other missing persons, from other obscure industrial sites, came forward with their own unsettling stories. Lawmakers, initially dismissive, began to feel the pressure. The Ethereum Collective, accustomed to operating in the shadows, found itself dragged into the harsh light of public scrutiny. In the ensuing years, a painstaking, relentless, and often dangerous legal and political battle unfolded. While direct judicial justice for the Ethereum Collective's upper echelons proved elusive due to their vast power and deep anonymity, the sustained public pressure led to significant outcomes. The Blackwood Mining Company was eventually dismantled, its assets seized, its operations exposed as a front. Dr. Alistair Finch, deemed medically and psychologically unfit to stand trial, was confined to a secure, high-security asylum, where he continued to mutter about the Ethereum and infinite possibilities, a chilling reminder of the dangers of unchecked scientific ambition. The Deep Earth Resonance Project was officially debunked by authorities as a hoax or delusional scientific fantasy. Yet stringent new regulations were swiftly introduced for geological surveying and subterranean exploration, particularly in remote regions. The sites of anomalies, including Crow's Tooth Island, were declared restricted zones, ostensibly for environmental protection. The public was told it was a case of corporate negligence and tragic accident, but the seeds of doubt were sown, and the whispers of a darker truth persisted. The fate of the 17 miners from Blackwood, however, remained a lingering mystery. No bodies were ever recovered, no trace, save for the chilling accounts and the one remaining obsidian rock, now secured in a deep vault, far from human manipulation. Their displacement remained a terrifying, unexplained void. Caleb Thorne, though forever scarred by his experience, eventually found some peace, living a quiet life as a fisherman, always keeping a respectful distance from the ocean's depths. Silas Thorne continued to fish, a haunted wisdom in his eyes. Sheriff Bart Grimsley, weary but resolute, never truly returned to his old life. The secrets he'd uncovered had fundamentally reshaped his understanding of the world. He eventually resigned from his post, becoming an unofficial consultant for Vance, quietly investigating other unexplained phenomena that bore the subtle, chilling hallmarks of the Ethereum Collective's continued, albeit more clandestine, operations. The story of the 17 miners who dug too deep and never returned serves as a stark, cautionary tale. It is a grim reminder that not all evils manifest in clear, discernible forms. Some hide behind the veil of scientific progress, driven by an insatiable hunger for knowledge and power that transcends all ethical boundaries. The pursuit of understanding, when unmoored from humanity and morality, can lead to the creation of horrors that defy comprehension, leaving behind only the chilling echoes of those who vanished into the void. Consider this: in our relentless quest for discovery, where do we draw the line between innovation and hubris? When does the pursuit of knowledge become an act of profound, irreversible destruction? And what if, even now, in the deepest, most remote corners of our world, the Ethereum Collective continues its monstrous experiments, quietly, subtly, probing the unseen dimensions, waiting for another breach? The silence that followed the loss of the Blackwood miners was not just a silence of absence, but a silence of complicity, a testament to the chilling truth that some secrets once unearthed can never truly be reburied, and their echoes will haunt us forever.